get started. All right, so what is this mistake that we are making with our assessments? Well, I'm actually here to tell you that the first mistake begins with this picture right here. The typical day of a math classroom teacher. We spend part of our time teaching a lesson, and then we spend part of that time providing our students practice on whatever it was that we just taught. And then what do? Sorry, Katie, I don't know if you're able to admit those people or not. We then follow that up with similar days where we teach new material, we practice that material, we finish up our chapter, and at the end of the chapter, we need to give a test. If I had you all in the room, I would say raise your hand if you give a chapter test, and I bet nearly everybody's hand would go up. And then I would say, what do you all do the day before the test? And you would all say, well, we review, of course. All right, fantastic. Then you take the time, you grade your test, you put the grades in the grade book, and then you move on. You move on from chapter 1 and you teach chapter 2. And once you teach chapter 2, what do? You test chapter 2. And we repeat this process from a singular day to a singular chapter, and we do it over and over and over again. And we do it all year. And what happens, my math teacher friends, when we get to the end of the year? We've given the last chapter test. For the most part, our students have passed these tests. We say, okay, guys, it's time for the end of the year test. I need you to know and remember everything. All 12 chapters, all 9 chapters, all 10 chapters, whatever it is that you've covered, we now expect our students to be able to retrieve and show that they know they have mastered everything. And while we wish that they were happy, confident, ready to be successful on that test, in reality, what's happening is this. They might remember the last test, but most things are fuzzy. They're frustrated. We're frustrated. I used to get this all the time. Miss Martin, you didn't teach that. And I would say, no, I absolutely taught that in chapter 3. And not only did I teach it, but I actually have a score in my grade book that says you got a 92% on that test. So you knew it back then. Why don't you know it now? Well, here's what I think the problem is. As teachers, we are waiting entirely too long to test everything. Students are not accustomed to cumulative assessments at all, let alone a large cumulative assessment that covers everything. We've just been testing them in what we recently taught. Our unit tests, everybody that's giving a unit test or a chapter test, all that's really measuring is their recent understanding. If we're going to be honest, is it really measuring what they have mastered over the course of the year? Our students are stressed because of it. They feel unprepared. We feel unprepared. And the worst part is, as teachers, I know you are working so hard. And I can't say every student, but I bet the majority of your students are also working really hard. And what happens is everybody gets to the end of the year and the results are not reflecting the work that you put in. And here's why. This daily concept of teach a lesson and practice what we taught, and then put that together in a chapter and test the chapter that we just taught, it works well in the short term. It does not work well for long-term retention. So what if, right? What if we could just cross our fingers, cross our toes, and say, what if our tests could grow gradually in size as the body of content that we teach also grows in size? What if our students were completely accustomed to the idea of a cumulative assessment? And when I say that, I mean not an assessment on just the last chapter, but an assessment that somewhat covers everything they've been taught so far. What if that became the norm? What if every test you gave measured what they actually know instead of what they just crammed the day before when you gave them the review packet? What if your students were confident and unfazed every time they saw old content? What if your students could take the results of their exams and instead of just putting the grade in the grade book, They actually had an opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Well, I'm going to tell you that Get More Math did every one of those things for me in my classroom. But it all went back to this very first day. I realized that if I wanted to prioritize assessments in my classroom that were cumulative and constantly measured and assessed everything, I needed to also shift my daily structure. So I moved away from teaching the lesson and only practicing that new content to teaching the lesson, practicing the new content, but also prioritizing old content. If I'm going to assess the old content, I need to make sure that I'm giving my students ample opportunities to practice and revisit the old content as well. Well, that's a lot of work. There's a reason I never did this for the first 12 years I was teaching. I didn't have the time. I had too many preps. I had too many kids. I lost my planning period. But when I found Get More Math provided me both the targeted practice on the new material and the spiral review practice on the old material. It did not provide the lesson. So Get More Math does not provide instructional content. I was still the driver of that piece of my classroom. But when my students were logged in and working in that spiral review, they were getting an individualized practice session that was prioritizing exactly what those students needed, so that when I gave them a cumulative assessment at the end of my unit, they were well prepared for that. Because again, look at each day. Not only am I teaching new content and practicing new content, but I am still prioritizing old skills. So as you take that model and put it together in an entire year, what happens after your Chapter 1 test? Well, it gradually grows. You get to Chapter 2, and your Chapter 2 test can cover both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. When you get to Chapter 4, you might not be able to cover everything in Chapter 4 and Chapter 3 and Chapter 2 and Chapter 1, but what if you were able to cover everything in Chapter 4, some of Chapter 3, a few skills from Chapter 2, and a selection of skills from Chapter 1? You're still telling your students you don't get to cram and flush. We have to continue to know and master this material over time. As that happens, this is what your students become accustomed to. They know in Chapter 8 that they're going to see skills from Chapters 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. When they get to the end of the year and they've been consistently taking these cumulative assessments, are they panicked when you say it's time to take the STAR test or it's time to take the Georgia Milestone test? No, they're not panicked about the big test because it's no longer a big test. It's just the last test of the year. That's what you've been preparing them for all year long. Not only have you been preparing them by delivering cumulative assessments, but you've been supporting their success by delivering consistent cumulative spiral review. The two pieces go hand in hand. I like to say there's a reason teachers aren't always giving cumulative assessments, because they know their students wouldn't be successful, because they're not giving constant cumulative spiral practice. You need both pieces, okay? Here's what it looks like in the app. When you log in to Get More Math, you get access to every grade level, so you can easily pull skills from above or below whatever grade you're assigned to. You then have this massive skill bank to choose skills to align to whatever your scope and sequence is, so we're not a curriculum. We are aligned to all the state standards, so you'll notice in my screenshot here, I have California up, but you will see your particular state if you want a state standardized collection to choose from. But on the left is where you can easily build assignments to match the lessons you're teaching. So remember, you teach the lesson, Get More Math will give you an assignment that will cover the targeted practice, which is the new material, and the spiral review content, which is the old. So let's just kind of take a look at what lesson 5 might look like. Here I am. I see a skill that says determine least common multiple of two numbers up to 100. So that must be the new skill that the teacher just taught. She can then decide how much practice she wants on the new content as well as how much practice she wants on the old content. Where does the old content come from? We don't decide, you decide when you built lessons 1, 2, 3, and 4. Here's what it looks like as a student. As a student, I'm logged in. You can see on the right, there's my least common multiple problem. That is coming from that white square in the targeted skills section. Once I complete that, I will then move down into the spiral review section. There's lots of squares down there. Those are the skills that were assigned from lessons 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can see the problem changed on the right. The nice part is, as the teacher, we can't take on anything else, right? All you have to do is decide what are you targeting today, because what you target today will become the skills that you review tomorrow. That's how the spiral review is actually built. Now, this is only looking at about 2 weeks of time. What would happen if we fast forward all the way to March? Well, if you look at that, you're going to see lots of squares in the spiral review. So here you are looking at one particular student, and you're able to see how this student is doing on every skill you've ever taught. The colors mean something. If a square is white, we don't have enough data to determine where that student falls. But once they answer that question at least 3 times, the skill will turn yellow or red. This is a little bit like a built-in exit ticket. No longer have to collect those little slips of paper from all 30 of your kids and go back to your desk and grade them, separate them into piles so that tomorrow you can work with them. No, you're going to have this data at your fingertips. But we want to move past this. We don't want to know only did the kids understand the skill the day I taught it. I want to know, do they understand these skills 3 days from now, 3 weeks from now, or 3 months from now? And that's what green, silver, and gold tell us. Those are our levels of proficiency that show proficiency over time. Now, it's not just spiral review that's given to the whole class. We're going to individualize it for each student, because here's what we know. Those weaker skills, white, red, and yellow, they're going to be different from student to student. So we're going to place a dollar sign on the skills that we want our students to practice most. The weaker skills, we need them to build proficiency. They're going to be included often. But those stronger skills, we still want to maintain proficiency. Just because you're great at it in October does not mean you will be great at it in May when you go to take that test if you haven't seen it. So because of that, the weaker skills we will include frequently, and the stronger skills we will include occasionally. Okay, talked a little bit about spiral review, but you came here because you wanted to talk about assessments. Let me show you how simple it is to build these assessments and get more math. Imagine, fast forward, we're done with units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I want to create an exam on unit 5. I'm going to simply click Create Exam. I'm going to then choose all of the skills from unit 5 and pull them directly into my assessment. But remember, I want my students to know that they always have to be held responsible for everything. That's why we've been practicing everything as often as possible in our spiral review. So I'm going to choose some skills from units 1, 2, 3, and 4. Takes me seconds to do that because they've already been selected, and I pull them into my test as well. Now, not only is that going to save you time, but so is the rest of this process. Get More Math is going to automatically grade every test for you. You will be able to dig in and see the exact answers for every student if you so choose. You can look at a correct and incorrect answer, and you can override the computer's score so that you have complete control. Now, I want you to look at Carol here. Carol took a test, 20 questions. She got 15 out of 20. That means she missed 5. You can see the 5 red X's here. And you can see that this is the first question that she missed. What's the rate of change? You can see this particular table, and she chose undefined. Okay? Keep that in mind, because an amazing thing happens. As soon as I hit Save Grade for Carol, I've told the computer, okay, I'm done with Carol's test. Work your magic. Watch what happens. Get More Math automatically creates an assignment that is specifically crafted for her and every other student in my classroom, asking her to fix every one of her mistakes. So if you look up there at the top, you'll see 5 squares with exclamation points. Those are the 5 questions she missed on her exam. Do you recognize the question right there? What is the rate of change? That's the answer she got wrong. So the first thing she needs to do in this assignment is fix her mistakes. Once she does that, you're going to look down there below at those other 5 squares. Get More Math is saying, listen, Carol, good job. You fixed your mistakes, but we'd like you to do some additional practice on those same skills. So what are we doing here? We're addressing the mistakes and then we're remediating them. We're giving our students an opportunity to do some additional practice. Perfect. As soon as your student completes that, Get More Math will again automatically create a specifically designed follow-up test for each student. Specifically designed how? Well, it's only going to include the skills they missed on the original exam. So remember, Carol missed 5 questions. How many fresh new questions do you see up there? Only 5. This is perfect. Get More Math will automatically grade it for me, and it gives my students a chance to show growth. Instead of just getting that grade, putting it in a grade book, returning it to your kids, my kids used to stick it in a folder and stick the folder in the bin and move on we went. With Get More Math, this becomes part of the learning process. So I would be able to pull up my roster and look at any given exam and see what was the original exam score, what was the follow-up score. And in that case, I would be thrilled because that showed me that Carol took that opportunity to make progress and show growth. Okay? Another really cool feature in our assessments is the analysis tab. So when you are in your exams, you'll see up there in the top right, I can click View Analysis. And what happens is it will show me every skill that was included in the test. It will show me how many of my students missed each skill, so I can easily rank them. You can see here, this was my most missed skill, 3 students, 2, 2, 2. You can select them. You can create another assignment based on those skills. If you're curious, who were the 4 students that missed that particular skill? No problem. You're simply going to click that drop down right there, and we will show you the 4 students that missed that particular problem. So the data that you're going to be provided, no matter if you're making cumulative assessments or weekly quizzes or chapter tests or midterms or benchmarks, the assessment tool is so powerful because your tests can gradually grow in size along with the body of content that you're teaching. Your students will become accustomed to cumulative assessments because they are so accustomed to the cumulative spiral review. Your students will be completely unfazed when they see old content. Every one of your tests can now measure what they know instead of what they crammed. Your students will have an opportunity with every exam to learn from those mistakes and an opportunity to show growth through those follow-up retests.